I'll start that now. So this morning we're kind of just doing grants overview, and then this afternoon we'll get more into the reporting and scheduling the reports. So it'll just we'll do a little navigation through WildCloud and InfoEd and through Office of Sponsored Programs website and the research websites. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So I have us on the sponsored programs page, but I'm actually going to go to the research office first. We'll just kind of go through pre-award through the process to post-award, and then our WildCloud stuff. And so I'm on the Office of Research website and proposal development. So if you scroll down, and so this is where PIs will start the process. So in the green sheet, that's what the PI will do. I thought I had a green sheet up here. So the PI goes into the system. They need to add the fiscal managers. And so in this case, Blossom was still the contact. Now it needs to be Maria Jenks, and then the departmental accountant when they are submitting the green sheets. So they type in all this info, their start dates, proposed end dates. If there's any cost share, that would be put here. And the indirect cost rate is also important on the green sheet. And so after they do this, then they print it and it comes up with a signature page. And so the way that it goes for us, Sally, in plant sciences, is the PI does this and then gives it to Ellen. And then Ellen obtains all the signatures and sends the green sheet with the full proposal to Joanne. And then Joanne gets the further signatures and sends it to the research office. After, well, it goes through a couple more things through the ag business office to check cost share, because cost share is a big concern. And so cost share should be determined before terms of contracts are finalized, because we have to come up with sources for the cost share. You can go into this system once. I think you should have access. I don't come in here ever. I just did so that you could see the green sheet, but you can see the outstanding green sheets in here that you have been tied to, because they have to like search your name. So Allie, you won't be tied to any yet. So that's kind of all I wanted to say about the green sheet process. And so in this proposal development, one thing that PIs might ask for are the fringe rates. So especially when they're going to hire a GA or any other person on their project. So within the proposal toolkit, there's a link to fringe benefits. Fringe benefits are not the same for projects as non-projects. And so the rate has to be approved. So it was pending from June through August. It went up to 3, down to 2.7, and then it ended at 2.4. And so I don't know that there's a better way to get around, like because I had all this planning down to the point, point one percentages to close out grants, and then they kept changing until they finally came with the approved benefits rate. And so as PIs are submitting for grants kind of towards the end of the fiscal year, they need to be checking this website to see if there's a new proposed rate for the next fiscal year, because that can determine how much money they get and if they get enough, or if they need to rebudget because they budgeted at 3.0% and it came down to 2.4%. So I have that bookmarked because I refer to that often. But particularly for GAs, it's 2.4%. Within here too, I also wanted to point out the roles and responsibilities. A lot of the pre-award stuff is for PIs to take care of. Well, at least in my experience in implant sciences, it's not our job to be talking to the sponsor. The PIs should be talking to the sponsor. We're kind of the support and the processors. And so if you ever need to refer back to kind of the process of what research does in pre-award, what the PI should be doing, and then as we get to post-award stuff, the research office just becomes the liaison between the sponsor and us as the department with the PIs. If there's any subcontracts, the research office kind of is still there to help, but most of the post-award responsibilities lays within sponsored programs to do reporting, to invoice, to draw down funds, and like the way that we're involved with the research office would be on extensions. The PI should be communicating with the sponsor. If they get an email back, they might ask you, what do I do with this and how do we get it extended? And so if they have either a new contract or just an email and they send it to you, I then ask them to forward it to the research email and copy you to track it, because it does take a while to go through the research office. Then they put it in into a workflow in OSP, and then OSP will then update WildCloud. And so for plant sciences, our OSP coordinator is Mary Runner. And so it ends up in her workflow. So I just try to track those things and who had it last, because sometimes extensions and other processes can take a long time, and we just have to keep following up, and especially when we're waiting for money. And there is a pre-award process to receive funds early if you need to. And let's see, I had that somewhere. There's a form to request pre-award spending. The PI should be completing that. I've only done it once. It's very rare, and probably it shouldn't be done if it doesn't need to be. So you just got to be prior planning and make sure that all these processes get done in time. For the pre-award spending, there is just a form that you fill out, the department head signs, the PI signs, and as an accountant, your role in this would be to provide the PI with the account string. And so, like working with Andrew, the one time we did this, we had to determine an account string. So if that funding doesn't come through, UW is still liable for that spending that happened. And so So that's that department guarantee fund. And that's why you don't want to do this very often, because if something falls through, we still have to pay for it. And so the case that we did it for, she knew it, like, paperwork was in the works. It was going to be 2 months on the sponsor side, and then it's probably going to be a month on our side. So she went ahead and applied for this pre-award. We put in an account number just in case, but we're still waiting on the paperwork, but it's coming. And she's pretty confident that it's coming. But I didn't know this process was even out here. So just kind of keep that on in the back of your mind. If somebody asks, it's out here, and you just have to go look for it, and create a relationship with your OSP coordinator. I think Mary's the one who told me that was out here to do that.
So, answer real quick on that. So, if that funding goes through and it gets all set up, how do you keep track of those charges that were spent prior to the money being set up? And then,
Well, it still has to be within the award dates, and so they set up the project, and so we're spending against the project, even though we're waiting for the money to come in. So some projects, the start date isn't until final signature. So in that case, you couldn't do this because you can't have spending before the start date. In this case, the project start date was in the past. It's always going to remain in the past. And so they set up the project with the amount of money that was on that form. And so we're spending to the project. And once the full contract comes in, they'll raise the budget to what it is. Because I think there's some rules on how much you can request for pre-award spending.
Okay. And I asked only because I had this happen this summer. Dr. Shoemaker had a grant come in, and I think it started like June something. But it didn't get set up, and we didn't actually even get that project number until August or September. So I had to go back because he was paying a GA. We were all her costs. I had to go back and do all these corrections when we finally did get that number. So I didn't know maybe if this would be easier than going back and doing all the corrections later.
I think you'd have to talk with your OSP coordinator on that. Okay. Because she still had to go through and set it up just like she was setting up the project. And so, the setting up process is slow, and that does happen. And so I don't know why, like when she did this, it went through super fast and it was working. And I don't know, I think that's just a conversation you would need to have, and if that's the right way to go. Because if that funding didn't come in, then you have to figure out a way to cover it. So I hate corrections, and I hate to do corrections just because it wasn't set up yet, like when you knew that all this was out here. So
my biggest problem is, I put the correction in weeks ago, and it still hasn't come off of his Grammy funding and onto the proper grant.
So with payroll, from what I'm gathering from doing corrections, if you run the payroll expenditures without fringe report, you'll see that corrections were made. In my instance, I submitted them at the beginning of October. The post date was November 1st. And so I've seen that I've seen it as the 1st on these corrections. So I don't know if that's like an accounting thing that they do on their side. But then the GL ledger has to close before they post to WildCloud and PPM. And so I just asked this question earlier this week because I was like, I am waiting and waiting for this to post in WildCloud and see that it cleared. And so then I went and ran the payroll expenditure report because that runs sooner. And you can also check in ECC because ECC updates nightly with any of those corrections. So WildCloud lag time is a long time. Like I had no idea it was that long. So yeah, I've been watching two corrections to pass for a month now. I think I submitted them on the 16th of October, and like she confirmed that she did them, and you know, payroll has so many too, and I'm like, I am sorry, Melissa, but can you please check? Like, we need to close this grant, and the systems just are hard,
Okay. And when stuff like that happens with me, I just get nervous that I did something incorrect because I'm
Me too.
so new
Yep.
at this.
Yep.
So good to
And
know that.
payroll corrections are the worst, and it's so hard to figure out the percentages. And once you make that mistake once, you don't. I've learned I don't do it again,
Yes.
because I made a mistake and had to do a correction to a correction, which is frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard and it's a learning process, and it takes forever to make those corrections and get them submitted and through the process. So
Okay.
yeah, I don't. It's hard. It's hard as we're waiting for grants to come in, because I had some GAs that I put on state funding waiting for the project to get extended, and then you have to go do corrections, and so it's just the way it is right now. Unfortunately, um, I know that they're making efforts to make that better. So let's see, on Green Street's Fringe, roles and responsibilities. Um, they have the indirect cost stuff here if you're interested in reading a policy about it. Indirect cost is usually determined with the sponsor and the PI, and so um, that will be on the green sheet and then gets translated into WildCloud. Let's see. All right. So now I wanted to go into info ed, and so I have info ed bookmarked because it's always super hard to get to. um, let's see, you can get to it somewhere within OSP, and then here it is on the research office. And so if you click on info ed, it takes you to the portal. And so within info ed, like when they send you an email that says a grant has been set up, I use that to just set it up in my shadow, but I don't save it. I don't download it. Sometimes I keep it in my email just as I'm quick searching for award numbers. But again with the filings, like this is going to be your final record, InfoEd and WildCloud. And so if you need to see a contract or invoices, any communications, you come in here to InfoEd if you're looking for the budget. And so if you like long hold or right click on the sponsored projects part, not the award, because you see there's two numbers for each of them. You go to proposal tracking and view, and then it brings up all of the award and project documents. And so I picked this one particularly because there's a subaward on this project. And so if you ever need to know what has been invoiced to UW from the subaward, from the subawardee, your invoices are in here. Let's see, I think I have another one already open, but it's not, won't have to think so hard. No. No, it's just gonna think real hard. here's one. Okay. Yeah, so this is that same one that's spinning. And so some of these awards have a lot of documents. I always like to filter, usually by most recent. If you're looking for kind of your general beginnings, here's your green sheet. You can pull it up as a PDF. You can look at the actual proposal, which is where you'll also find the budget. Usually this is the contract. And so that's where you get your start and end dates from. I have found, I think just twice, that there was, a disconnect between the green sheet, the contract, and what was loaded in WildCloud. And so as a PI, tells me what's happening. I kind of make notes in my to-do spreadsheet of grants of start date, end date, indirect cost rate, and total amount. And then as I'm building my shadow, I make sure that what Mary sent me as the new award notice email, I just kind of glance and hope it all matches, and because there has been a time where it didn't. And so we were going back to the contract from years ago just to find out what the actual contract dates were, because the contract is the binding agreement, not the green sheet. Since the green sheet is the UW process to get things set up. So I come in here often, particularly for, like I said, green sheet, proposal, and invoices. And so lots of attachments. You can click them, open them. We don't have permissions to change them. And so, feel free to click around in here as you are looking for things. And if you need to check a budget in the actual contract, you can do that in here. Do you have any questions about InfoEd? Have you been in here?
I have not. This is all new to me, but it's fantastic because, again, I have paper files of all my grants.
Yeah.
And some of those proposals are 70 pages long.
Uh-huh.
And I hate to have to print them out, but that's what I was kind of shown how to do it. So I'm going to stop doing that.
Yeah, I come in here. Let's see. What's wrong with my PDF?
I have found there's several things like that I don't know if my Adobe's not
Oh, okay.
up to date enough, but I'm able to open stuff like that. So
okay. Well, usually like it'll open and it'll just show all your contract with signatures and everything. So they put the final version in here. So like those ones that have a start date as last signature, you can go in here and make sure, they said the proposal was going to start July 1. Last signature didn't happen until September 3rd. And so you can go in here, you can see the terms of the dates, and then go look at that for that last signature date. So yeah, I find this very helpful in here because I don't keep paper files. So.
And Winter too, if you ever have an issue with InfoEd, if you actually open up in Firefox, that's like the best browser to use it with.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. I think I usually do Firefox for InfoEd, because that's where I have it bookmarked, and that's good to know. Thanks, Allie. As I was saying with the invoices, this one has a subcontract. So Kansas State University has an invoice. A quick note on subcontracts. You create a PO for the amount of the subcontract. Sponsored programs will run an invoice. Oh, that's when we're paying. So with this one, KSU invoices us. And so then we pay them off of this PO. And so this one looks like invoice 18. And so they send us the invoice, we receive part of that PO, and then the payment goes to them. And so when we get into WildCloud, you'll see that there is a committed cost because there's a PO sitting on this project because there's a subcontract. And depending on the way the contract's set up, subcontracts may or may not have indirect costs up to a certain limit. So I'm gonna go ahead and get out of info ed. Oops. Am I still sharing? Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. Did I have anything else? Oh, I did. OSP has a few training materials. These are just the PowerPoint materials. Expenditure corrections is huge. They had an audit finding, and so they are, really looking closely at expenditure corrections and the high volume that we live off of. And so with expenditure corrections, we try to do everything we can to prepare and be timely so that we don't have to do them. In the end, it's inevitable, but we need to try to minimize and just prepare as much as we can so that we're not doing so many expenditure corrections. So they have this PowerPoint out here. It's awesome. It gives you some examples. I thought this was interesting. So this was their audit results. And so I just thought it was interesting of, how much we changed from one project to another project. Just because a project's over, that's not good enough documentation to support why we transferred from one project to another. So they give you some good examples of what an expenditure correction should say. It's kind of down at the end, I think. Yeah, your explanation. So they give you some acceptable examples, which I have found helpful. I used to do memos for these, and it seems like they're accepting your explanation via email now. So I have a template for a memo, Ally, in some of the grant files, but I don't know, it kind of depends on what your correction is when I determine if a email's fine or if it should be a memo, or if there's multiple PIs involved. I usually create the memo so that both PIs can sign it. And so you have to give a good explanation of why you're moving it to the new project and how that charge is related to the new project. You also need to add your steps taken to avoid this in the future for any corrections over 90 days. And so some of the reports we'll run this afternoon will help you identify charges sooner than later. And so, you shouldn't be making all these corrections a month before the grant has ended or after the grant has ended. So hopefully there's some things we can do to be proactive in terms of expenditure corrections. And so this PDF is just on the financial affairs webpage under sponsored programs. They have a little training link. So I know Lori did it for the OSP office, and I hope someday she'll do it for UW as a whole, because I'd love to hear her expertise on it. A couple things to note. Costs not allocable to a project can't be charged to any project, even temporarily. And so, I mentioned holding some posting GAs to a different account. So it was the state account, because you can't post it to a project that it's not approved under, because you should be, charging it to the project that it belongs to. So if they're doing work for a specific project and it's not set up yet or not extended, you can't charge that to another project and do a correction if it wasn't initially allowable on that first project. Zach had kind of mentioned split funding in doing expense reports, requisitions, POs. You can do that down to the percentage. And so use the split funding instead of doing corrections again. Just prepare, allow time. We can do as much as we can to be proactive. As I mentioned, the correction shouldn't be a means of managing our money, but just kind of those few things that we can't help instead of having such a high volume of expenditure corrections. And Tanya, you already kind of asked about the lag of payroll. And so again, it's just another thing we have to work through with our systems that we have. So I'm going to get into WildCloud unless you guys have any questions yet. Okay. All right. So, from the homepage, you can go through the pancake or through the tabs. If you click awards, it takes you to your base page. To me, this is not helpful. I don't like it. I always end up clicking the manage awards, which brings me here. And this is what I use always. The other screen I am not finding helpful. And so if you want to change that preference, you can do that by going up to the caret by your icon, set preferences. The projects and grants management preferences. On the awards homepage, I'm going to change that to manage awards. And then I'm going to save and close. So now I have grants management saved in my favorites. Now when I go to grants management, it takes me directly to this page. It's just a two or three clicks lesser. And every click that can be saved is wonderful. And so I have done that, and a useful little trick. So some more tricks in here. You can change your columns, and so you can click what it is you want to see. You can see it by organization. Sometimes PIs have projects in different organizations, and so one of the reports we'll run this afternoon is helpful to run it by PI instead of by organization, because otherwise you lose some of those that may not be in your org. You can do it by remaining days so that you can kind of watch, so that you can watch your upcoming projects that are going to be ending. And so then you can filter by your remaining days. I'm going to take that off. If you reorder columns or within the columns drop down, if you scroll to the bottom, go to manage columns, you can move what you want to see first, last. You can, just move those to the order that's good for you. I keep primary sponsor in here because I know that Andrew likes to know who the sponsor is, sometimes more so than the project name. So like Bayer, some of them like to see Bayer versus, so if they say, I have my Bayer, I'm like, which one is that? You can go in here and add your primary sponsor to that. So you can also do those same things with columns and reordering your columns. down here in the more detailed. And so you can move these however you want to see them. I find that from the project to the available, this is what I'm using often. And so I've kind of moved those around to fit what I use most. In search results, if you do show filters, you can filter by all kinds of things. What I tend to filter by is by PI. As you type it in, it'll start to bring them up. So I'm going to click on Renda. You can do it by your award number. You can do it by sponsor. So if I wanted to see all of them from Bayer, I could put Bayer in here and then see that, you know, Dan has one, Andrew has, like, who else has a Bayer project? And then I'm going to save Renda because I look at her projects often. And so you can save your search. Oh, you have to take that out. It doesn't do it for you. If you want it to be your default, you just check your little box. And so now if you go, so, you know, you had to add your filters. Now I can see that I have a filter for Andrew, and that brings up all his projects. You could filter out expired or closed and just have active. You could have, you know, some of the, put it the way that are closing soon. And so these filters are pretty helpful when you come in here often to be like, who's ending and where am I? And so I thought that was a pretty neat trick. So we're just gonna go into, who are we in? Renda. We'll go into one Renda's. So on this page, you'll see the budget. You have to scroll down to see all of your budget lines. And so sometimes in a contract, there isn't a set budget, but PIs still have to submit a budget to OSP. And so that's how this gets set up, is based on how the PI lets them know. On those ones that don't have a budget, it's kind of hard to track and to like be able to have this as meaningful data. But some projects are very specific. You can't go over, or you can go over a certain percentage. And that's all depends on the sponsor and the contract. And I expect the PIs to know that information. And so one of the reports that I send them, you know, I trust that they're holding that, and I try to help the best that I can, but I can't do that for every project. And so it's their responsibility. But if you need to look at a budget item because you think somebody's close because you just had it in your mind, I don't know, you can come look in here, as well as info ed. And so committed amounts, those are only POs. So it POs, and so on this one, we have subawards. And so I created 2 POs for her subawards. So you can see that that's the type. And so these are your roll-up categories. And so I did a PO, and that's the only thing there. Salaries do not encumber. So even if a GA is being paid from here, we can't encumber it. So that's where you use your shadow to encumber. If you're not encumbering things on a shadow, sometimes I don't understand why even keep shadows. But I try to encumber everything that I know, or if they have a piece of equipment that's going to cost $4,000 and they're not going to buy it till April, then maybe that's something you want to put in your shadow just so that your PIs have a better understanding of how much money is left. So that's how I handle my shadows. But if you're running your reports and just copying and pasting from your report to a shadow, I would just run the reports. I don't know. We need to be, the proactive piece of this is to encumber, and to do that, you have to have a shadow. So it's unfortunate that we can't do that within the system, because that would help all of us. Yeah, so that a committed amount I wanted to talk about. In here, if you go to view, you can see the indirect cost rate. And so this one has an indirect cost of 42.86%. So that number in the front, you just always add 2 decimal points. And so this is not total, like this has some exclusions. And so MTDC versus TDC mean different things. I think there's MTDC 1 and 2. And so that just determines what indirect costs are excluded. And so on this one particularly, it has subcontracts, and she has GAs. And so tuition is excluded from indirect cost. If it's TDC, usually that's a lower percentage. It's gonna be like 5%, maybe up to 20%. It'll just say TDC total. And so that means anything you charge to that project is going to be charged indirect cost. But so in here, your subcontracts, in this case, it's subcontracts up to $25,000. And so anything up to $25,000 is gonna get indirect cost charges charged. Anything over $25,000 on a subcontract will not, because it's being excluded within their indirect cost agreement that they did back at the contract level. So, and that automatically calculates based off of this formula here. So that's always a good place to check if somebody wants to know if tuition's being excluded. That is kind of all I wanted to go through for the wild cloud stuff. The reports, I think will take, I was undecided on, if we should do reports now or later, but I think we can save that because it will take quite a bit of time. So I guess the only thing to mention, and Zach had gone over that earlier this week, is with the poet string, using your project ID and using that crosswalk. So when you're working within WildCloud, it translates from the number to the word for projects. When you're doing IDTs and anything outside of WildCloud, you have to be sure to use the words and to use that crosswalk between the regular chart string numbers to the words. So I think that's all I have for now. Thoughts, questions? You want to look at anything?
I think I'm good. I learned a lot this morning.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there were a lot of little screens on there that I wasn't aware of. So yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Wasn't sure. So Allie worked in sponsored programs. So do you have anything you want to add that we need to know, Allie?
I mean, that's pretty much it. The only thing that I was recently told after a meeting that I had with them is that WildCloud is going to change a little bit. They just got the approval, so now they can start putting in more indirect costs and more like specific things of what they actually are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I need to get off their listserv because I still get their emails.
maybe you need to stay on and keep in the inside scoop.
So so excited. They were like, guess what? And I was like, oh, I'm not really, okay.
So
Yeah,
would you see these, would those be within here or,
yeah,
yeah,
it's going to
okay,
become so much more detailed for us. So,
okay,
yeah, that'll change here. Actually, it just got updated last night, so they're going to start putting those in with the new projects going forward.
okay.
But I mean, yeah, that's all I can think of.
That's good to know.
Mhm. Oh, there's one more thing too. With a wildcard, if you have to look between them for information, I was told that we need to look at InfoEd more than wildcloud because
Mhm.
especially if we're looking at the older wildcloud ones,
Yeah.
because coordinators have changed out so many throughout the years that some of
Sure.
them might say like fixed price and they're not actually fixed price.
Mhm.
So they were saying that if we wanted to look at anything, like for instance, if we wanted to do the residual transfer, that you
Mhm.
need to look at InfoEd to make sure that you can.
Okay. That makes sense because we had one for Renda that closed out and this did not equal what was in InfoEd because it was an old one. And so the indirect cost was being charged incorrectly. And so then a bunch of corrections had to be made just because it was being charged incorrectly. Yeah, that's a good point, Ally, that we need to be comfortable using InfoEd.
Yeah, and there's also like I can't remember where it is. I know I have it saved on my other computer, but there's a practice InfoEd that you can go into also.
Oh,
Yeah, we don't edit anything in there, so I don't think we need it, but
yeah.
that's what they taught me. They were like, go in here and mess with it so you can learn without messing up anything.
Yeah. Well, when I asked OSP, they said I can't edit. And I've accidentally clicked on the edit and I think it gives me an error. So we should.
I need to get them to like revoke my privileges because I can still edit things.
You can, right. I bet Tandy can't though, so.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. I'm gonna stop share and maybe you're gonna come back this afternoon, Tanya?
Oh, yeah, I plan to be back, yes.
Okay, great. Well, we'll see you guys in a little while.
All right, thanks, Lincoln.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Mike.
Hmm.